Oh, there's no substitute for the real thing. IndyCar returned last night after an 8-month-plus layoff at Texas Motor Speedway, a 200-lap, 300-mile race. And before you say it, you've probably already typed it in the comments as I'm speaking this, I'm well aware that the race wasn't very good. But I will say this, and I said it yesterday, I am so thankful to have racing to talk about, to have IndyCar back, to have things somewhat start to get back to normal, at least in terms of our escapism in this country. Because if you look at what has happened in the last 3 months, the incredible pain and suffering that our country and really by extension the world has faced, it's an ugly place to be right now, the world. And we need stuff like this. I mean, and for some of us in the, I guess I will say jokingly, the anti-haircut states, social media has been just as bad, if not worse, than the real world itself. I mean, it and I don't throw this word around lightly. Social media right now is a toxic, ugly place to be right now. And it's not healthy, pretty much anything that our lives are kind of experiencing right now. So to have IndyCar, for those of us who consume and enjoy that series, to come back, it's like been a breath of fresh air. In fact, I after the live streams I did yesterday, which by the way, wow, what a response from you guys. I'm definitely going to continue doing those. We had as many as, I think it was 660 people at one point watching that stream live. I think we had over 31,000 people total tune in the entire day of coverage yesterday. And the chat was bumping. It was really cool to see. I was really happy with that. But it was invigorating. I mean, I went to bed last night at like 4:30 a.m. and I woke up at 10 a.m. and I was just full of energy. And I haven't felt that way in quite a while. And again, a lot of it has to do with the toxicity of social media and the absolute horrors that are going on outside of our doors right now. It wears on a person. But to have IndyCar back in my life, I'm sure many of your lives as well, it helps. It helps so much. And I cannot wait to discuss a lot of things that happened in this race because they are very important. I'm going to touch on a few right off the bat. NBC Sports, got to give a huge shout out to NBC. Not going to give a shout out to the Cincinnati affiliate and let them know on social media, but the NBC as a whole, the effort that they put forth, Roger Penske, IndyCar, getting that race on national television, they did 1.5 million viewers, which is the most watched IndyCar race since 2016. And it was did 300,000 people more than the highest non-Indy 500 race of last year. And it tripled or quadrupled the TV rating of Texas last year. And the race wasn't very good. So imagine if they'd put on last year's race this year, and it probably would have been an even more stout TV rating. But it's something to build on. I just want to give NBC a shout out right off the bat. We got a lot of controversy to talk about, not the least of which is the racetrack. We also got to talk about some of the moves that we saw, and I've actually got to defend a couple of drivers, and some of the race control choices. I think those things were a bit suspect, if I'm being perfectly honest. But first, I need to make a quick plug. Monday, 4 p.m., I am dropping merch, my merchandise. I've waited and worked a long time to get something that is right. I want quality. I want a quality product for you guys. I want something that isn't unique, because I think a lot of influencers, YouTubers, personalities kind of half-ass their merch. We're not doing that. We are going to be launching tomorrow with Race 92 Racewear. I'm actually wearing one of their shirts right now. You should check them out, but I would say wait until tomorrow at 4 p.m. Because not only will my shirts be launching, and as you'll see on the screen here, we're going to be doing 4 shirts. I already revealed one of them on the streams yesterday, and I'll show it here as well. And we've got 3 others that I'm going to show in a video tomorrow. And we're going to give you a discount code to save some money if you want to buy a couple of shirts. So that is very exciting. But without any further ado, let's talk IndyCar at Texas. We're going to do things a little bit differently this time. We are going to look through the entire field, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on each driver. Obviously, Scott Dixon was the winner. Absolutely dominating performance. This isn't the last time you'll hear about him in this video. Simon Pagenaud drove a pretty good race. It didn't look like the Penske's were particularly good on tires, which is the same that can be said for Joseph Newgarden, finishing third. A great result for a car that was clearly not handling throughout the day. Of course, Newgarden started on pole position. Great day for Zach Veach, a track that has bit him quite a few times, but honestly one of the tracks that he's probably the quickest at, taking a 4th place in the first Andretti Autosport car in the field. Ed Carpenter, a great recovery after crashing in practice. I would say that was definitely a salvaged race for the Ed Carpenter racing team, who had a big struggle all day. Connor Daly, another fantastic oval performance, particularly in a Carlin racing car, getting a top 6. That is unbelievable work. You got to think that Daly's one of the best oval track drivers in the series. Colton Herta brought back the car with all 4 wheels on it this time. He wasn't quite as exciting as he was the last year, but from a points perspective, from a championship perspective, you got to look at some of those double headers coming down the line and some of those tracks that Colton is very strong at. You got to think that he may be a championship contender in his 2nd season. Ryan Hunter-Reay. I can't say enough good things about Ryan Hunter-Reay because of the incredible job he did to drive through the field after a penalty which was incurred by breaking the Parc Fermé regulations, by changing a black box in the car. There were several cars like that, and we'll talk about them as we go down through the rest of the field. Oliver Askew, top rookie performer, top McLaren driver, and is in his first IndyCar race, bringing home a top 10 at Texas Motor Speedway. I don't think it can be understated what a job that guy did. You go to P10, Tony Kanaan was really the feel-good story in that beautiful 7-Eleven paint scheme for the final time, Texas Motor Speedway. It's a shame because Kanaan was really doing a pretty bang-up job, and in fact it looks like AJ Foyt Racing may have a pretty strong package this year, but he got a speeding penalty, fell through the field, and only was able to get 10th because of how the track worked with being able to pass people. Charlie Kimball, I think, was one of the most impressive drives of everyone. Despite crashing on the final lap, he was running a legitimate 4th and was passing Penske cars on his own in a Foyt car. One of the best AJ Foyt racing performances we've seen in quite a long time. Pato O'Ward was the first car 1 lap behind the race, was pretty quiet outside of a big strong lap in practice. But again, I think it was job done for McLaren to get both of their rookie drivers home safely at Texas Motor Speedway. Will Power, another driver 1 lap down, had trouble in the pits and just never really recovered. Marco Andretti was fast in practice, but another driver that just didn't show much in the race. Alexander Rossi struggled at the beginning of the race because he was also struck by the mechanical gremlins before the start. He made up 2 laps during the race, I'm sure aided by the wave rounds, but still managed to bring it home 15th. Jack Harvey had a miserable day, but didn't crash the car, and I think that's the key for the Meyer-Shank Racing Team. Graham Rahal, the first car, multiple laps down, another car that suffered mechanical issues. Ironically, all of them were Hondas. I don't know if that says something or if it's just a strange coincidence. James Hinchcliffe, for some reason, was 2 laps down, and I'm not really sure where he lost all that time. It must have been in the pit sequence or possibly during one of the yellows, getting caught out. And then Marcus Ericsson was 4 laps behind the race because apparently he ran out of fuel, which was very strange because there was a tire stint limit in place, which fell well within the fuel stint windows. Felix Rosenquist crashed out of the race. Of course, he was probably the closest challenger to Scott Dixon all day, and it was a shame his race ended up against the wall. Santino Ferrucci was fairly quiet, but fell out of the race because of a mechanical issue when one of the wheels fell off of his car coming out of the pit and it broke. Rinus VeeKay did not have a very good weekend. 2 crashes pretty much simultaneously, or at least within the first 30 laps of both of his sessions, were very, very abbreviated. And unfortunately, he also took out Alex Palau, the other rookie in the race. And Takuma Sato did not even get to start the race after crashing in qualifying. So, like I just mentioned, there were a lot of crashes, particularly from those guys at the back, and they were that was really the theme in practice. We had Ryan Hunter-Reay crash, a veteran. You saw Rinus VeeKay crash. He was a rookie. You saw Ed Carpenter spin out. He's one of the best oval track drivers in the series. And then, of course, Takuma Sato had that massive crash in qualifying, which eliminated him before the green even came out. And what a lot of it was being blamed on was the PJ1 traction compound. You were able to notice the difference in the two grooves in the racetrack because one was significantly darker than the other. Now, I haven't found a definitive explanation as to why the Indy cars were not able to run where the compound used to be. And I say used to be because apparently the compound had either worn away after the last NASCAR race that was run there 7 months ago, or I should say, Texas actually tried to wash the residue of the PJ1 traction compound off of the racetrack, and that created some of the issues. I also saw a theory from Joseph Newgarden that because the black tarmac was hotter or was able to conduct light better, it got hotter and therefore was less grip. I did see a fact and a figure from Firestone that said that tarmac was 15% less grip than the rest of the racetrack. But ultimately, what it comes down to, well, another big factor was the fact that Firestone was unable, because of the COVID situation, to build tires specifically for the track this weekend. Now, that resulted in tire stint lengths that I talked about a little bit earlier in this race. The drivers were only allowed to make 35 green flag laps on their tires. Now, yellow flag laps did not count towards that 35 lap mark, and theoretically, had there been enough yellow in this race, the mandatory pit stops would have probably come down. But here's my big issue with the PJ1. Whether it was or was not on the track, it clearly affected whether, it was on the track at one point, and whether it was on there still or had gotten cleaned off, it clearly made the track worse than it was last year for the Indy cars. Okay? And that's on Texas Motor Speedway, right? So, and it's not even necessarily the reconfiguration. Now, is it as ideal as it used to be at Texas Motor Speedway? No. The old layout was probably way better for Indy cars. That being said, last year's race, what I thought was excellent, and that was on the new configuration of Texas Motor Speedway. The difference here this year was that big black skid mark in the top groove. And I think it would be unfair to blame Firestone for being unable to build tires. Honestly, what do we always hear about Firestone? It's always about how great the tires are and how reliable they are and how the drivers won't trust any other tire. So you're telling me that the onus has to be on Firestone to produce a miracle tire that will be able to magically make Texas a 2-lane racetrack. I think that's ridiculous. And it's a shame, too, because, again, you had network television, you clearly had a big TV audience for this race, and you were unable to really capitalize on it, and maybe you still did. Maybe the casual fans didn't notice quite as much as maybe we thought they did. But certainly some of the NASCAR fans that I follow on social media were confused, to say the least, about why the traction compound, or at least the appearance of traction compound being down, didn't make the IndyCar racing any better. Of course, I would argue that it doesn't make the Cup races much better, but I digress. So let's take a look at some of the highlights from this race. The start of the race, which we were also worried about, I thought the full top lane of the track was just going to go straight in the wall in turn 1, but no. Everybody got through safely, and we had a clean start on lap 1. Alex Palou and Rinus VeeKay had their crash in the middle of the race, or at least in the middle of the second stint, the second tire stint. Rinus VeeKay, his second crash of the weekend, and Alex Palou was really just an innocent bystander. I felt really terrible, really, for both of them, and I think VeeKay was getting a lot of unnecessary flack on social media and even got lit up by his boss, Ed Carpenter, after the race. Dixon was dominating, but then we had a debris caution, which I would say was pretty suspect, and Dixon lost the lead in the pits. But he made an outside move into turn 1 around Joseph Newgarden, which was ballsy, to say the least. It looked like Felix Rosenquist was the guy who was going to challenge Scott Dixon for the win, but in lap traffic, as Marco Andretti took the air off of James Hinchcliffe's wing. Hinchcliffe pushed wide, and Rosenqvist was the innocent bystander, lost control in the PJ1, hit the wall, and was out of the race. The final restart is controversial, and we'll have to talk about the fact that they didn't wave the lap cars around the pace car. So Scott Dixon cruised to victory as Charlie Kimball crashed on the back straightaway in the serial, the big pack of cars that were all getting jumbled up and all bunched together, but it didn't matter. And I don't think it probably mattered anyway to move those lap cars out of the way. Scott Dixon, a dominating performance, taking the early points lead, and surely you start thinking of him as the favorite for the championship. Now, I do really want to talk about that finish because there seemed to be a lot of confusion. In fact, there was confusion on my end because I was like, why isn't IndyCar following their own rules? Because generally speaking, IndyCar has changed their restart procedures over the last few years to try to make it more entertainment friendly. Oftentimes because the teams have, or the cars and the drivers have a hard time passing lap traffic because the field is so tight these days, they move the lap cars out of the way. Now, there's several ways they do this. They do it with the completely insane wave around rule, which essentially gives lap cars a free pit stop plus a lucky dog. There's also some other provisions within the rules that within a certain amount of laps left in the race, they will just get the lap cars down pit lane, get them out of the way, get them out of the line, and let the lead lap cars all be together. Now, that didn't happen this race. And while I will say as a purist, Scott Dixon earned those cars that he passed on track between him and Simon Pagenaud for second. By what appeared to be the IndyCar rules, or at least how they seemed to want to enforce their rules, that was screwing everybody behind Scott Dixon for any sort of a shot at winning the race. Now, IndyCar apparently has a provision that because Rosenqvist's crash happened so late, they were unable to red flag the race to make sure that they can sort all the scoring and stuff out. So they just threw the green without moving the lap cars out of the way to get a green flag finish. And there may be some reasons for that. It may be that NBC was tight on time. It may have been that they didn't think they were going to be able to red flag the race and get it, with a certain or a sensible amount of laps left. Maybe they didn't want to put on a one-lap shootout. There's a lot of different things you could think about there. I'm not necessarily blaming them because, again, they did write a rule, or they wrote a provision into the rules to allow for this sort of thing. But ultimately, I mean, if it were up to me, I would just throw all the entertainment crap out of the window and make sure the cars can pass each other. And then who cares where the lap cars are? Because if the cars can pass each other easily, then the slower cars will be passed by the faster cars, and you'll get better racing as a result anyway. But yeah, for the most part, it wasn't a great race. But I think there are some points that I want to discuss right before the end of this video because this was the first race for the Aeroscreen. And you notice how I haven't talked about it very much is because it really didn't affect much of the race. I know a lot of people were going, "Oh, I hate it." It's every Facebook group on Facebook that I joined that's an IndyCar group. It's all a bunch of boomers telling me how much it looks horrible, and I don't care. In fact, in some ways, it actually shortens the nose of the car with how far the Aeroscreen comes down, and it actually, from some angles, makes it look better, in my opinion. But I think Texas was like the crucible. It was like the one race that everybody was fearing for the Aeroscreen, and it couldn't have gone more smoothly. There really weren't any real problems. I mean, I know some of the drivers don't like it for personal reasons one way or another, but outside of the drivers being much more hot, making it a much more physical experience, there really wasn't much of an effect on the product itself. The track itself. Texas Motor Speedway, man, you got to get your crap in order the next time they come. I know these were extenuating circumstances, so I don't want to be too hard on Texas Motor Speedway, but it's very clear that whatever you've done to the track with the PJ1 compound, washing it off, didn't work. It made everything significantly worse. Got to change it next time because, I mean, when's the next time you're going to get national TV coverage at that racetrack? And finally, looking to the future, the TV rating was excellent for the NBC Sports or the NBC broadcast. And again, that was without the Cincinnati market. You look at, unfortunately, there's a month break. And again, that's a COVID thing. It's kind of hard to control. But the positive is they are going to be on NBC for the next race, and it's going to be paired with NASCAR at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And because there are no fans in the stands, you're going to have a huge, humongous TV rating in Indianapolis, in the Indianapolis area. I would almost guarantee you that. And I think they can probably continue that momentum. And I think they will probably put on a better show at the GP of Indy than they did at Texas, which is another thing to think about. So that's the first weekend of racing IndyCar for this year. It's been way longer in the past than I would have wanted it, but I'm excited to look for the future and finally get this season underway. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the content, and we'll see you in the next video.